Hi, and welcome to the podcast today. We're welcoming Namita Jacob to bring us insights into leadership development. Welcome, Namita. Do you want to give us just a couple of minutes of background on yourself before we go into the questions?
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Namita Jacob. I am a former U.S. diplomat with USAID and now converting to full-time facilitation and leadership coaching. I just did this presentation with Cambodia Institute of Directors on the use of work style assessment and personality assessment tools to optimize the way organizations work. I've led over 300 of these types of sessions across the globe, and I'm passionate about using tools like this to try and improve the way that we work.
Great, thanks. 300, that's impressive.
Thank you.
Okay, first question. We talked about the tools and the assessments, some like DISC and Insight Discoveries. They're really powerful tools. In your experience, how have the frameworks helped teams to move from misunderstanding to meaningful collaboration?
Great, thank you. So I think these tools are their treasure chest of information that leaders or staff can use in any organization. It not only helps you to understand more about your own work style, which will help you become a better employee, but as a leader, it helps you to understand your team a little bit better. It helps you to understand how decisions should be made across your team, or at the very least, how they should be communicated across the team. And so, what tools like this do, in essence, is beyond just giving you some feedback around how you operate, it gives everybody a common vocabulary around how we can talk about work styles that actually we prefer, the ones that we have conflict with, without it feeling too personal. And so when you use insights language or disc language or any of these work style assessment tools, you're maybe ego out of it so that you're able to kind of just address the conflict itself in a way that's productive, that it gives everyone kind of a safe and shared communication language to use it. Um, I've also seen some drawbacks to using tools like this, which is when people don't understand it fully and they use words like, well, I'm blue and you're red, so it'll never work between us or we'll never get along. Um, I think the one of the most critical components of people understanding these tools and making these tools work for the office is recognizing we each have all of these preferences in us. We just tap into certain colors more easily, and certain colors we actually have much more difficulty in trying to tap into. And so when you kind of get past that kind of friction in understanding that, it does help to lead to better conversations and conflict resolution.
Right, right. So not for pigeonholing people into one and
Right.
then stopping there. Yeah, good. Do you have any kind of memories or an example where you were working with a team and you really saw a positive result out of that?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I'd say I often see that when there is conflict in an organization or in a team, it's not necessarily about a, a strategy or a technical skill or a process. It's usually around either a miscommunication or an assumption or just differing work styles itself. And so I've seen a lot of these aha moments happen in these retreats where people are able to see like, okay, the reason we haven't been jiving, the reason we haven't been necessarily getting along is because you see my decision making as too objective and not people oriented. And so I just need to communicate with you why the decision I made was more important than understanding how this decision might affect the people, for instance. So I think it really helps people communicate better, which resolves conflict, which I've seen lots of positive benefits too.
Great. So not only self-awareness, but that wider awareness of the dynamic of what's going on. Yeah, great. So self-awareness has become really buzzword. Um, Lots of people using it, gurus and all that kind of thing. You know, when we use that, how do we go beyond the surface uh, of that and get into seeing the behavioral change, lasting behavioral change in people's lives?
Yeah. So, at the beginning of all of these sessions, I talk about the roadmap to personal effectiveness. And so the very first step in personal effectiveness is just to understand that these different styles exist and that the way that I operate is probably different from the way in which you operate. And then steps 2, 3, and 4 is not only learning to appreciate and recognize other people's work styles and the differences in which they work, but it's adapting our behavior, adapting our communication, adapting our decision making, and putting that into practice every single day. And so, yeah, I do think self-awareness is kind of a buzz, or organizations might prioritize like a few hours for an offsite to focus on this particular tool or to do some sort of activity that helps with self-awareness, but then nothing happens after that. And this is a roadmap to success, right? Like we're never going to become personally effective after a 2 or 3 hour workshop. We do need to we need to make a regular habit out of utilizing this information, using it to be better. So I use the tool all the time when it comes to coaching conversations. I think all managers should be coaches of the staff that directly report to them. And so I think it's an important tool to not only help you grow as a manager, but to help your staff develop and become better and more personally effective.
Mm-hmm. That's really great. In the Cambodian Institute of Directors Certified Director course, we have a leadership module, and we start with self-awareness is the beginning of good leadership, and move it out from there. And we do a lot of focus on that. So it's really positive, and it's interesting to see the responses of the participants as we move through that module. Yeah, good. Thank you. So blind spots and biases, we all have them. How do you deal with that when you're working in a retreat or with a group? How do you deal with those?
Sure. So blind spots show up in more than just conflict. It also shows up in feedback. And so feedback is an important part of being a good manager. Oftentimes we'll see that some managers are conflict avoidant. And so giving feedback is actually one of the toughest parts of the job. And so blind spots is actually a very professional and pragmatic way to. What's great about profiles like any of these DISC or insights discovery profiles is it usually will provide you a chapter on what I would recommend is working with that chapter specifically and working with your staff or your supervisor to try and figure out how can I get better at this? This is something that I've been known to not, this is a challenge for me. This is something that I might not necessarily see so easily. And so what are some tips or areas of improvement that you can help me to understand how I can get past this struggle or challenge? One other thing about blind spots is we are blind to them. And so we often don't even recognize this is a challenge area for us. So I would suggest being very open and flexible to hearing from people that know us really well. And so that could be people in our personal life, like our life partner, or our siblings, our family members, or it could be like the staff that directly report to you. Oftentimes they know a lot about your work style. In fact, maybe more than you do. And so being open to hearing that feedback is a great way to get past some of those blind spots.
Yeah, sure. because one of the things about biases is we admit that and recognize we have them in the first place, and then we can actually move on from there. And the same with the blind spots. Yeah, good. One final question. It actually wasn't in our list of questions, but it's a cross cultural. You've obviously done this more than 300 times. You've done it cross culturally. What's your observation about how the tests and the assessments fit into cultural situations in Asia or America or the UK, somewhere like that?
Yeah, sure. So, I hate to use the tools to kind of generalize and stereotype people, but we have seen some trends across general cultures. And that is because, like I mentioned in the insight session or the session that I did just previously with Cambodia Institute of Directors, a lot of our perception is formed by our cultural beliefs, the way in which we were brought up, the way in which our community makes decisions. And so it is also understood in the world, right? So where we've seen a lot of this fiery red energy, the D in DISC, which is dominance, we've seen that in more expats, Western centered expats. And so people from either the UK, Europe, or the US, we do see this results driven type of leadership style. In Asia, very likely because of the cultural preferences and the way in which the community is seen, we see a lot more of that earth green energy. It's the steadiness in DISC. It's the introversion and feeling function. So very focused on relationships, focused on people, creating harmony, not having conflict. And so you can kind of that, yeah, a lot of culture brings that up, right? So there's across Latin America and Africa, I've seen a lot more sunshine yellow energy, so a lot more outspokenness, thinking outside of the box, thinking more visionary. And that could also be related to the way in which we have been brought up, the way in which we view our cultures.
Great. That's really valuable tool in multicultural environments and teams, which we have today so much more than in before. So, yeah, another great way of being able to use that tool and help understanding and better communication. Yeah, good. Thanks so much for your time today. It's been great to have you on the podcast, and I really appreciate your insights and wisdom as well.
Yeah,
Thanks
thank
so
you so
much.
much. It was an amazing experience. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Great.